Dun 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 dun.
No air horns this time because I know
No, it's just one of those.
I could hear it. Where you start with your air horn. No. Please.
This is a very grounded podcast.
It is.
So if you notice, I don't even do my t-shirts on this one.
You go what?
I don't even do my t-shirts on this one.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm always in my shirts.
Thought you're coming from court.
Nah. Or a funeral? Nah. We don't do
No child support?
Nah.
Okay.
Nah, we don't do that here.
Okay.
Anywho.
Welcome, boys and girls, to yet another episode of the podcast, which we have not titled yet. And Dr. Naeem was asking me that by the time that this is, you guys will have a name by this, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. But remember, Dr. Naeem suggested we go with that Mental Health Podcast.
No, that wasn't him. You said that.
Yeah, and he said it's catchy and it sort of ties in
No,
to
you
our
suggested
network.
Sonda. You suggested that Mental Health Podcast.
You know what? We'll have a vote. Let's have a vote from our viewers.
No, let's not.
Let's not? Okay.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Well, fine, we can. But I've always said the wisdom of a mob is inversely proportional to its intelligence. You're going to put a whole bunch of people here and you think you're going to come up with a smart decision?
Everyone's going to come up with their own name.
You know, Henry Ford once said, if I was to ask people what they wanted, they would have said, make a faster horse.
Yeah, true.
You know,
as
what
opposed
I mean?
to a car, yeah.
Yeah, so he says, this is what I'm going to give you.
Yeah, true. And what we're going to give them is that Mental Health Podcast, episode 2, with Dr. Naeem once again. Last episode, we got so much awesome feedback, emails flooding our inbox. Instagram was busy. And I think it spoke to the fact that we are actually doing something right. I don't know how you're feeling about it, but so far. And remember, we kept talking about we need to sponsor every post that we put up. And it turns out we actually didn't, because that thing just flew and sold itself. And I'm happy with where we are today. Episode 2. With no name though, but here we are today. What's that doing there, by the way?
Jesus Christ. The creatures of old habit. This is not that Zep podcast. I mean, same faces, different attitudes. I mean, he's dressing smartly now, like he's going to court or a funeral. No air horns, no cursing.
But I keep saying it's the same brand.
The same brand, yeah.
Yes, it is. It is the same brand.
Different thing.
Yeah, it's still VW. Could be an Audi.
Yeah.
You know what I
VW
mean?
Passat, VW Golf,
There you
VW
go.
Polo.
There you go.
So how does it feel being on an episode and you don't curse for a whole hour?
It's difficult.
It's like holding a fart in, eh?
It's like holding a fart in.
Yeah, I know.
Again, mob mentality. What you just said, intelligence is really...
What did you think about last week's podcast, though? The episode, the one that aired last Thursday.
So we spoke about
Your early childhood.
our origins, and we're sort of continuing on that, building up on that today, right? Mm-hmm. What do I think about it? Let me not speak what I thought.
You were triggered, though, weren't you? Because you thought a lot about what you did, about what your dad did.
Yeah, remember Dr. Naeem actually said, this episode might make you hate your parents. But then when I look back,
It also
in retrospect, when you really think about it, I think even as human beings, we're still evolving and we're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. So in our parents' generation, beating is what worked to iron us out. You know what I mean? In our generation, we figured, like Dr. Naeem said, we can actually talk to kids. And we found
Does that work for you?
it does. After a beating when they were younger.
Wait, which one did you beat?
Both.
Including the one that called me boss?
Yeah.
I don't like that. Did you know that his youngest daughter thinks, or she knows,
She thinks.
that I'm his boss?
I mean, it depends what he portrays you towards her and at home.
I'd like this.
So-
Let the doctor dissect.
So that's why she probably thinks that's the boss.
No, it's not even about
So how do you think he
Or
portrays me?
Also, that's
Also?
one. Or two is what he communicates. Maybe there are times when you call and he'll be like, "Oh, the boss is calling. I mean, I need to answer this."
You know where that comes from?
How do you speak about me in your household?
I don't even speak about you. That's the thing. It's that thing where whenever I'm watching the podcast, because my daughters wonder what I do for a living.
Okay.
They have no idea. My first one is actually saying that I've never seen you work my whole life, and she's 5. She's talking about my whole life. 5 years.
That's her whole life.
That's her whole life. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
5 years is her whole life, and she's never seen me work because every time she knocks up from school, I'll be at home watching TV or we'll be playing.
Right.
So when I showed her the podcast, I said, "Oh, that's what I do." So they saw me next to him. So when he came home, they thought, "Okay, since that's work, that must be the boss." You know what I mean? I don't know why they didn't assume that I'm the boss.
I look the part.
He looked the part.
I look the part.
Anyway, today's topic, Elson, take us.
Emerging adulthood.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it's sort of a continuation to what we had last week. And there's a progression. Like we said at the end of the episode, it's a journey. And you should be able to tell the progression in what we are trying to aim at. And if you've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed, Kalenga, if you take a look at the demographic of the people that normally watch the podcast, it's a lot of people from 18
to about 35, 40, 45, somewhere there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess this is the demographic that we most likely would be speaking to. I don't know when what we consider as emerging adulthood. What age range are we talking about here?
All right. So the concept of emerging adulthood, when we talk about psychology, is fairly new, right? And when I say it's new, it's because it's something that's just been coined in the late 90s and the 2000s. But it actually looks at ages from late teens, say 17, 18, going up to 29. So that's where we're talking about emerging adulthood, and emerging meaning, growing, coming out, that type of thing. But then when we talk about youth, right, we want to talk about the younger population. We keep saying there's a youth population, youthful population. So when we talk about youth in the context of Zambia, we say age ranges from 15 going up to 30 and as far as 35. In the other countries, European countries and North American countries, it's usually from 15 to 25, including Australia, right? So it's really about where you are and what the definitions are really. But the concept of emerging adulthood is from the ages of 18 going to 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just, following up on what you just said, there's, I don't know if it's a common saying or something I just heard somewhere where they talk about you're not who you were 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. There's that point, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll throw it back, and I like doing this. I'll throw it back at you.
I know I'm actually getting accustomed to this.
Yes, I feel like,
Yeah.
as a few people on the podcast comments actually said, it's like, therapies, a free therapy session. So you're literally getting that, Kalenga. So
I am
try
grateful.
to open space, okay, with the whole wide world. But think, so what are the things that you've been labeled as from the ages of, say, 15 to 30? And do you still have those labels today? Do people still say, "Oh yeah, remember you did this when you were this old," and they still remember you by that,
What
right?
happens to you?
Yeah, I remember burning somebody's fence when I was young.
A fence?
Yeah.
How did
You know
you
what was grass?
Like the picket?
Yeah. No fences, and they had this like all around their yard. It was like a 50 by 50, and we're playing with bow and arrows back in the
What
day.
fence?
Huh?
What fence? How do you burn a fence?
Yeah, this is the story I'm telling now. What do you call those fences, by the way? The grass one.
A hedge?
Thatched fence.
Yeah, all around their yard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yes,
hedge,
yes.
I think.
No, it's not a hedge. A hedge is more like planted, right?
Yeah.
Yes, these are.
No.
That's the.
Like on
he's
a
talking
wire
about
fence?
yes, but then there's
On a-
thatch.
Yeah, then you put grass there and then
Yeah, so it's thatch, just like you said.
thatch.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We call it a thatch. So they had this all around the yard. And we were playing with bows and arrows. We put fire on the bow and arrow. This is like around 18, 19 hours in the evening. So we shoot it in the air, and we'd like the way the fire would light up on the arrow when the arrow shoots up. Then I shot mine, and the wind blew, and it landed in the fence.
Okay,
And the
Taz.
whole fence
Okay, Tarzan.
burnt up. So There's a
How
guy from
old
this
were
family
you?
who still judges me by this. I think I was like 15.
It wasn't
Okay.
last year.
And I was
So that was adolescence, right? And then you're
Yeah.
going into young adulthood, and you're still judged for that. Any labels that you've received, Elson, in your 20s or mid 20s
Casanova, no?
No.
that still stay
No,
with you.
I was not really good with girls like that.
Okay.
No, not that I remember. I was a recluse growing up. I kept to myself, believe this or not. I was a nerd. Oh, which actually brings me. Okay, it's an unrelated topic. But the college that I went to are actually opening up in Zambia. The ones that were based in Belgium.
Talk about digressing. Anyway,
But
Okay.
anyway,
You're a nerd?
yeah,
Okay,
I didn't have any
at
labels.
home, in your family, they still reference you as that. What I'm getting at is labels. What label do you have?
I don't have any.
You don't have any? How about you, Galenga?
If I do, I don't know about it.
Okay.
well, maybe they still call me DJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And why would they call you DJ?
Because the school dropout.
Because I was a DJ.
Okay.
Do they call you DJ though, really?
Yeah, people still call me DJ.
Who calls you DJ?
My brothers. I don't like the label.
Okay, fine. So the point is, you are not who you were 5 minutes or 5 months or 5 years ago. You are constantly growing, and you're constantly going through life, and you're constantly thriving. But the age period of, say, teenage years to early adulthood, which is below the ages of 29, you're going through all these phases in life where you're not quite an adult, but you're not a child either. So there's that group of a population that it feels in between, right?
Yeah.
So, but then the challenge is, despite you growing out of that phase, say you're in your 30s, people will still remind you or remember you by those years, or they may label you. And there are many people that are always labeled to say, oh, this person used to take a lot of alcohol when he was younger or when she was younger, or this person used to be, very not serious, very lazy. And so this person is always going to be lazy, right? So these labels are, very much ingrained in that age period. And that's where the challenge comes in, because then if someone keeps throwing that in your face, how then do you progress in life? So that's where the concept of, you're not who you were 5 minutes ago. You're not who you were 5 months or 5 years ago. You're constantly thriving and growing and evolving. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Keep going.
Yeah.
No?
No, keep going.
How am I? Anyway, just building up on that as well. Let's talk about what being a youth means and what that means in terms of mental health and mental illness.
Okay, so the thing about young people or the youth is, I'm going to break it down biologically, psychologically, and also talk about it from a perspective of development and brain health. First of all, did you know that up to 15%, 15 to 25% of mental illnesses, not even just mental health that we discussed, but we're talking about illnesses developed by the age of 14 to 15. Right? So by the time you're 14 or 15, you may actually have a mental illness. And that's 25% of the population. And then by the time you're 25, that number increases to 75%.
Wow.
So, and the mental illnesses that I'm talking about are common, such as clinical depression, clinical anxiety. Okay. And this is where, you're constantly uncertain about what's happening around you, or you don't feel you can carry out a certain task, or you feel in a certain way, or you constantly feel worried about something. So at that age period, if you're feeling in that way, how then are you going to be productive and part of society, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. That's just a statistic that we all need to understand. Secondly, we need to understand that the brain, and I come back to this because oftentimes we think of mental health as just something from out of nowhere, but we all have an organ in our body, which is the brain, right? The brain is constantly developing until the mid-20s. People think that once you've, passed adolescence, then you are, you're an adult. It's bam, you're there. You have to take up responsibilities, but your brain is still developing. And there's this understanding. And this is where people need to understand that turns out the part of the brain which is responsible for you to think rationally, to make decisions, to be able to have the correct judgment, and is still developing, right? That's the part of the brain. Even inhibitions, things like, I can act aloof in this environment, but I should hold myself in that environment is still, molding itself. Even things like flexibility in terms of, doing multiple things at once is still developing. But then the part of pleasure, emotions is fully developed. So your emotions are fully heightened. So this is where you will be taking risks and you'll be, moving from one place to the other, and you'll be able to do all these things. But then when it comes to controlling that, there's still a misconnection taking place. Also, another thing about the brain during this period is there's what we call myelination taking place. Okay, so this is where we all have neurons in our brain.
Who?
Myelinations. No. So myelination is where kind of like wires, insulating the wires to make sure you don't. It's more safe. So that's what's taking place. It makes you think stronger and makes you act in a better way. So all this is still taking place, right? During that age period from the ages of 15 going up to 25, 26. And this is why it's really, really important for people to understand that the period of youth and emerging adulthood is very key in helping people understand their mental health and mental well-being. Because if you're going to miss that window period, you're going to end up with full-blown mental illnesses, which are just going to constantly keep evolving and, complicating.
You mentioned clinical depression and anxiety. What are some of the major causes? What would see a huge chunk of the youth having any one of those two or both in some cases?
Okay, so I mentioned anxiety and clinical depression because those, according to prevalence, most common mental health disorders, these are the ones that are most common in that age range. And then when you ask why and where does it stem from, this is where we often say there's biological factors. This is where we talk about genetics, inheritance, does it run in families, right? That's one of the key things that comes in. Or is it that psychologically learned behaviors, what we spoke about in the previous episode where we're talking about origin stories, your childhood and what your parenting was like, what your guardianship was like, what you learned around your environment, right? And then we're also talking about the nurture part of it where your peers and your environment comes in. So all of these different things actually, co-create, so to speak, or co-combine. There's multiple factors that can actually predispose an individual to have clinical depression or clinical anxiety in this age range. It's not one thing that will lead to it. There's multiple things. Yeah.
Speaking of depression, I'd like to bring this early on. We got an email from a certain person who wanted to remain anonymous. When was the 7th? Okay.
I've seen it, yeah?
Yeah.
Should I read this?
Yeah, read it out.
And we'll call him?
Yeah.
Or her?
Yep.
Am I reading the right one? I don't want to bring out the name.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Yeah.
All right. So the email says, "Good morning. I just watched the episode featuring Dr. Naeem and I had a question or two with regards to the coming mental health podcast. How does one practically manage the stress and anxiety that comes with being stuck in the past? I'm in my late 20s, stuck in a low-paying job with low academic qualifications despite being academically gifted. I am thankful for the job, but I'm tortured every day by how my late father's legacy and career is milestones ahead of mine. I have realized that I subconsciously created repetitive patterns that tried to get me out of my situation with the motive of meeting/exceeding the bar my father set in the family, but I keep finding myself in the same place. I am a gifted writer, a creative, and have keen entrepreneurial mind, but my complexes keep me misaligned when I try to engage in the dispositions that could get me out of my situation. It has affected my relationships. I keep losing partners. It affects me socially as I struggle to build social circles and I struggle to focus on one thing. I'm also not doing well at my job. I have read psychological literature by Dr. Carl Jung, Dr. Carl Rogers, tried expressive writing recommended by Dr. James Panabaker, and I'm an avid follower of Dr. Jordan Peterson, but I'd like your take as well. Kindly keep my identity anonymous. Thanks.
Right. So, that's a very in-depth self-awareness analysis of an individual.
I was about to say the same thing.
Right. But at the same time, there's so much uncertainty in every sentence that the individual brings out. Right. And this is where we're talking about the concept of individualizing, okay, and realizing who you are, what you want to grow into. And this is exactly what the person that coined emerging adulthood speaks to. Saying that, you're not quite an adult yet, but you're not a child either. And you're in this age of in between. You're trying to figure out who you are. And you're feeling, going through instability in many facets in your life. He speaks about job. He speaks about, he doesn't enjoy his current job, but he, at the same time, he knows certain traits he has. He's a creative, he's a writer, and he knows that he enjoys that. He's been through multiple jobs, right? And this is what you need to understand. During emerging adult, you change as many as 5 to 7 jobs before you actually find the right fit. Right? The job market constantly, churns you around. And that's so much instability. He talks about relationships, which again falls into the period of emerging adulthood, where, you're literally trying to find the perfect fit in terms of who you're going to match with or what you want to see. And sometimes you're also having challenges with trust and things that come back from your childhood, right? The origin stories that I mentioned too. And then in his case, he also speaks about a legacy that he feels the need to...
Right. He's living in his father's shadow.
It's like, I want to leave or meet that legacy. And that's something that he self-guilts himself or herself, feels that way. Or there's also the mention of maybe what friends and family tell the individual, right?
Right.
Like, why would he say... that I feel like this, or why would she say that, right?
Yeah.
So what we can do now is, I'd actually appreciate if we could have a call and a conversation and see where this goes, because this is exactly what a person goes through in emerging adulthood.
Right. Okay. Hopefully we'll get through to them, bearing in mind they wanted to stay anonymous. But yeah, I'm lucky because... Okay, just hold on. Hi, Chief.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Perfect, man. You're speaking to Elson. That's that
Yes,
podcast.
Yes.
So we're calling in regards to the email that you sent. And as you requested, we're going to keep you anonymous. We're actually shooting an episode right now. I'm with Kalenga. I'm with Dr. Naeem, Martin, Lamek. Not that those two matter.
They do.
To their parents.
To everyone.
All right. So I'm going to hand you over to the good doctor. We had read your email out. So if you would like to say it in your own words, so as to give context, and I'm sure Dr. Naeem would most likely have a few follow-up questions. So, yep, you can go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. So I've been struggling with how would I say it? I've been struggling with moving forward in life. I started to notice this some years back, and over the years it's been affecting me in the sense that I suspect I have been stuck in the past, mostly due to family issues. I would say unresolved traumatic experiences that I've had. And so, with that being said, I tend to have tendencies that create these patterns that end up being repetitive for me. I'm going to give a brief background about myself, in the sense that I work at a job where I find it unfulfilling. I find it unfulfilling for me. I don't have high academic qualifications. I probably sent that in my email. I don't have high academic qualifications. I have this 9-to-5 job, and it's been very unfulfilling for me. I'm doing what I can with my job to take responsibility for my life, to take responsibility for my family, but I failed to move forward in doing that. And the thing that mostly tends to affect me is the fact that I'm trying to do better than my father, in the sense that he was very successful. He was very successful in his life, and he passed on when I was school. You know, growing up with that notion, you get to an age where you're like, okay, this is where I'm coming from. This is my history. And there's that thing of the next generation should do better than the previous generation. I've been struggling to do that. Everything I try to do has this underlying motive where I'm trying to do things with a sense of maybe beating or trying to exceed the legacy that he left. Every venture I try to get into always has that motive. Whenever I'm trying to do that, it affects my focus. I'm at a point where I'm struggling to do well with my job. I feel burdened with it. I feel I could thrive in other fields, but I don't know how to escape from my present field. I struggle to build social circles. I struggle to interact mostly properly with people around me because of my present circumstances. So I would like help with regards to that. I'm an avid follower of psychology. I got into psychology, let's say, in 2018. I've been reading a few things on psychology. I listen to Jordan Peterson. I listen to, I read books by Carl Jung. I'm a follower of Nietzsche. I've tried to follow some of the material that they offer, but I wouldn't say it hasn't been helpful, but I struggle with focus. I struggle with living in the present. I feel somehow psychologically trapped in the past. And I would like the doctor's help with regards to that.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing your email. And from the outset, I will actually tell you that, look, your email is very insightful. One, you're very self-aware about who you are. That's a given from the email that you've shared with us. Further to that, with every sentence that you've shared with us, it's very clear that you are feeling uncertainty. But then at the same time, you're very brave in the sense that you are able to take the next step in terms of finding what is it that makes you who you are. I would like to ask, how old are you?
I'm 28.
Okay, so you're 28, and you've been saying that you've been feeling this way for quite a few years now. And when did you realize this struggle to coach yourself? You said you feel you're struggling with quite a few of these things, in particularly your job, particularly the belief that you have to meet the expectation of your late father's legacy. May he rest in peace. The understanding that, you have a belief that, each generation has to do better than the previous generation. So when did you start how old were you when you had these beliefs?
I would say I was about 23.
Okay.
Yes, I would say I created these behavioral patterns when I was 23. And since then, it has affected me.
Okay. All right. And then when it comes to, you said that you have a job right now, you're not happy about your job, you're not comfortable with your current job, and you feel like you would do much better in another field. But then again, you then self-reflect and introspect and understand that you don't have the qualifications that need you to actually get into another field. Then there's that uncertainty that you've mentioned. If you don't mind me asking, how many jobs have you had so far before this current job?
I haven't had any previous jobs.
Okay.
I don't know if I could build up on that just for a minute.
Okay, sure.
Okay, yes. The thing is, immediately after high school, that was 10 years ago, I didn't enroll into university despite having successful grades. I didn't enroll locally into university because I had these chances for scholarships abroad, and they ended up failing. At some point. So I struggled. I come from a small town, very different from Lusaka. I come from a mining town, actually, and it's hard really to get jobs here. It's hard to find employment. And so I struggled with finding employment for years. So what I did later on was I enrolled into an apprenticeship program. And through that, I ended up working at my present job, craftsmanship.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing this about your life and helping us also help you. It takes a lot of effort to actually know that you want help, and then it takes even bigger effort to reach out for that help. So again, I'll keep echoing this to say you are very self-aware in as much as you share that you are in this uncertain space and there are quite a few struggles that you face. Many of the things that you've shared are more in line with the fear of the unknown, and you keep referencing to say you're living in the past. Yet you have had 28 years of your life, and you clearly know that this is something that you've been trying to understand since you were 23. That already gives you that, you've been going through a period of 5 years where you're really trying to understand yourself. You're taking some self-help understanding, and you delve deeper into psychology, and you're following a few individuals in that space, and you do say it helps, but you really feel stuck. And I would like to share with you to say, this is a very normal feeling to feel, especially with given the many things that you want to aspire to be. You are asking yourself, who am I? You're asking yourself about what kind of job would make you feel self-satisfied. You're also asking yourself about relationships, and you've said that it's actually helped making you realize that you can't or you're unable to keep or focus on relationships. So what we're discussing on today's episode is actually talking about a particular concept which is very Western, I must say. And the concept is what we call emerging adulthood. So it is a notion that because of the revolutions that we're going through in society and cultures, when we look at our parents' life, it was more about, getting an education, learning a particular skill, and then finding a job. Once you find that job, getting married, and having a family and moving on, and so on and so forth. But there's been many revolutions since that time. The revolutions I speak about are things like, we've moved from a manufacturing industry to more information and marketing industry. So since the onset of IT, information, the computer, there's need for more and more education for you to actually meet the needs of what the world needs in the markets, right? So this means that you need to spend more time learning about education and certain other things. So there's this huge shift in our society right now. Then there's also the connotation of how is it that we view certain constructs like women empowerment, and also constructs like youth movements. Understanding that young people now are pushing certain things such as marriage further on in life, right? If I was to ask you, at what age was your dad married? In fact, let me ask you, at what age was your dad married?
Probably 30.
Right?
I'm not too sure.
Okay, all right. And then at what age would you like to see yourself getting married?
Probably 30 as well.
Okay, all right. So that's a match right there. Okay. But when you look at the previous generations, the median age at which people used to get married was, for a male, it was 25, okay, plus minus 1 year. For a female, it was 20, 21, okay, and that's changing now. So there's all these shifts in society that is taking place, and what you are actually going through is all part of this phase of, a milestone or journey where we call it, you're literally emerging out of that and you're trying to find your space as an adult. Okay. There's also what we call the age of feeling in between. You're not quite young as an adolescent, but you're not an adult either. We full, taken up responsibilities like marriage, being responsible for someone else and yourself, etc. Right? Then there's also the concept of possibilities. You mention a lot of opportunities and possibilities that you have that you want to explore, but at the same time, you're wondering, how are you going to achieve that? And then there's also the concept of instability, right? This is your 20s are the space where you go through a lot of changes in terms of your biological, your physical self as well. Also a lot of changes when it comes to relationships, a lot of changes when it comes to jobs and the job market. I know you said that you've just been in one job since you got in, but you've been transitioning from one phase of that job to the other. So there's a lot of instability as well. So what you're facing because of all these needs based on societal views and cultural views, and also your past in terms of, you want to meet the expectations from your late dad and you want to also, do better, is leading you to feel uncertain and making you feel anxious. And this is making you feel unable to actually perform and be productive. So what I will tell you is, what would really help you is unpack all these things that you've actually shared on the podcast as well as on the email. You actually do need to go through an interpersonal structured therapy where you literally go through each and every statement that you've mentioned, and how is it that you can define your ideal self, who are you, and what is it that you would want out of you so that you don't feel like you're in a job where you're not happy. Because all of these things are all internal, and they are not going to be like, if you go through therapy, you're going to find the answers. No, you're going to learn the tools and understand yourself better so that you're more comfortable in who you are, rather than you wanting to meet certain standards that maybe society or your previous experiences or your childhood has actually put on you. So I will actually tell you, and I will echo again to say you're actually very self-aware, which is a very, very strong trait. So more power to you. And for now, we'll actually ask you if you have any feedback. But beyond this, we'll get back to you via email and pairing you with, therapy so that you go on this journey and figure all these things out so that you feel at more at peace with yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've actually gotten a few things that you've said, and I do take them very seriously. Would I ask another question though?
Okay, so for now, what I'll actually ask is, you've requested to stay anonymous, and we appreciate your sharing. I wouldn't want you to feel vulnerable right now because you're on air right now, and this is going to be live. So I would actually be more comfortable for you to share this through email. So we'll get back to you via email. And then from there, you can ask the questions, and I'll facilitate and link you with the support that you need. Yes.
Okay, that's understood. Thank you very much, sir.
All
Thank you
right.
very much.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks a lot for this, man. Thank you for your support, and we hope you will get the help and the resolve that you need. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
All right, cheers.
Yes. So feedback, Kalenga.
From the conversation we've just had?
Yes.
You must resonate a lot with this, saying that you've got low academic qualifications too.
I've got very... my esteem is in the right place, so I can't really relate that much. But to feel that maybe I have to get to the levels my dad did, even though my dad did achieve quite a lot, I know.
You're doing pretty well for yourself. Doing extremely well.
I'll let you give the feedback.
Okay, okay, Elson, before I go, what do you think about this conversation then?
I feel there's a lot of people that are going through what he is going through, for me, it has never been an issue, but I do understand where he's coming from, and I feel there's a lot of people that face what he is facing, where you've got low academic qualifications for a number of reasons. Number one, it could be that your family couldn't afford for you to go to school, and that starts a ripple effect of all these insecurities and the misfortunes that then follow that. So what he's going through and how people then deal with it, and this is how sadly you go to low income neighborhoods and you see a lot of youths wasting away extremely precious and important time getting drunk, getting high, just so they maybe numb the pain, or they want to get through the day, and they live each day as it comes, right? So they get through this day. I don't know if this is huge or prevalent, where the youth are actually drinking cough syrup. You get numb, you get in these days, and tomorrow is the same thing, and the day after. I feel it really stems from that.
I appreciate that you're giving this feedback, because a lot of people are actually in this space of, young people, and this is a whole new life phase. Before, it used to be child and adolescent, adult, old, right? Now there's childhood, adolescence, emerging adulthood, and then old. There's literally a whole new life phase that has been, present since the coining of the term emerging adulthood by Dr. Jeffrey Arnett. Now, I always say this because, you see, we understand mental health and mental illness from the Western constructs, right? The European countries and then the North American countries. But emerging adulthood is also very much valid in very many populations in a country like Zambia, despite it being culturally very different. We have an individual, he says he comes from a very small town. Yet he literally is feeling all the things that emerging adulthood is talking about, feeling in between, the age of instability, feeling overwhelmed because of certain things that he wants to answer about himself at this moment, but also coming to realize that he's uncertain about many things, and he's asking why. Right now he's in a job, so he's probably comparing himself to other people who are jobless, right? And feeling guilty. Why am I not happy in this job? Because I want
people doing more than him. I think
exactly,
for him it stems from comparing himself to people who are doing way bigger things than he is.
Well, with him, it's more about the belief that he has to do better from the previous generation, which is his dad, right? Not really about people. Then there's also, he's got so many possibilities, and that is what emerging adulthood is about. And that's why you see so many people having this debate. And this is why Elson keeps throwing this at you, Kalenga, which I don't condone. I'm just going to say this here. That
the college dropout thing.
Yes, college dropout, right? Okay.
I take it proudly. I wear that badge proudly.
Okay. So
really shouldn't.
Education and the need to be educated, but then at the same time the possibilities that are out there beyond education or apart from education, and which he mentions. He's in a job, he's not happy in that job, and he wants to try other things, but he doesn't know quite where you are. So all these things are very well defined, and if you're going through these phases, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It simply means that you're going through life, and it's a journey, and this is where you are not who you were 5 minutes ago, right? You're still growing and you're still evolving. And because the pressure is there to meet those needs, he's already said, look, and I asked to say, at what age did your dad get married, right? And he said 30. And what age do you want to get married? 30. Technically, in the olden days, when I say olden days, I'm talking about 3 decades ago, literally, or 4 decades ago, the median age in the 1960s to where we were until the 1990s, the median age for a male was 25 plus minus 1 to 2 years, right? Median age for marriage for a woman was 21 plus minus 2 years. And when I say marriage, you're literally saying the woman is going to be a homemaker and the man is going to be the provider and be in a job. That's not the case anymore. We're seeing more and more young adults putting away with marriage and pursuing other domains in their life, such as education, such as careers, such as jobs, also relationships. Relationships as well, very key, and we'll deep dive into another episode specific for relationships, but I'd like to touch it during now, because of your emotions being heightened, your pleasure and reward area being heightened, now there's also a shift in terms of relationships. The concepts of sex before marriage, right? And us being a religious country and culturally, but we do see young people in sexual activities and practices, right? Okay, so there's so many shifts that are taking place in society, and this is why there's all this instability and feeling in between that's taking place.
To go back to this guy that we spoke to, I don't think, and Kalenga and Doc, feel free to jump in on this. I don't think the fact that he's not been able to sustain a job, I don't think it has got to do with the particular job or the type of job that he has. Although he's mentioned that craftsmanship, etc., etc. I actually think that the issue is to do with his own insecurity and the battles and the demons that he's fighting within himself, that he's not been able to be quote unquote as successful, because again, that's subjective and relative. When you speak of success as his father has been, there's been so many instances of similar scenarios where the father has been, he's run so many companies, and the child has got a pretty good paying job, could be an accountant, you know what I mean? But then if they feel I've not been able to match the standards or the level that my father got to, they'll still have the same feeling. So whether craftsmanship or you're basically an accountant in a medium to large company, you still would most likely have the same feeling, and it's got really nothing to do with the job that you have.
Okay, so if we're going to do a survey and ask everyone, not just in the formal sector where, you know, there are paid jobs in terms of contracts, etc., where you get benefits out of it, I'm also going to ask people, a majority of our people in the country are in the informal sector, right? These are individuals who are getting paid on a day-to-day wage basis, you know, in the communities out there, in the low socioeconomic spaces. If you're going to ask everyone, are you happy with your job? Right? The answer is going to be, I feel like I can do so much more than what I'm doing right now. And that doesn't mean it's happiness. It just means purpose and possibilities, right? Okay. And I don't label them as internal demons or things that you're going through. It's really about introspection and beliefs. This is a belief that many of us have. We have to meet up to society's expectations, if not society, family's expectations, if not family, peers' expectations, right? And this really puts you into that space where you feel anxious and uncertain, and you never feel enough. And it actually spills over into other facets of your life. It could be relationships, love relationships, friendships, right? And you deflect. And you start becoming envious, or you can't hold on to certain things because you're constantly communicating to yourself and saying, it's all, you know, I can't do this. So this henceforth, even other people looking at me in that lens.
Speaking of lenses, are we looking at this also from the parents' perspective? Like, what kind of a home are we trying to understand? What kind of a home did this guy grow up in? Which ties into my question. What's the importance of positive guides or guardians in a situation like this guy's?
So in the space from 15 going up to 29.
But maybe the parents were giving him too much pressure to live up to what the dad had achieved.
You know
what I mean?
I hear you. And this is where lenses and parental guardian or just guardianship really is important, because I say this in a country like ours. And I genuinely would like to give a shout out to my high school teacher, because guys, I used to fail primary school.
We've heard rumors of you being a genius through and through, man.
Nah.
What was that guy's name again?
Fierce.
Yes. Like I'm what I call a late bloomer, and someone in the public space as well. Laura Meaty also shares that. Her story is also her being a late bloomer. You can't always be perfect. So there's always that guardian that comes through in that space in your life, you know, that, you know, mentors you or sees that potential in you and really pushes you, right? So that's where I I always say that in this space, from the ages of 15 going to 29, you really need that support structure. It could be because by then, remember in the previous episode, we were talking about origin stories and your guardianship and your parenthood, right?
Yeah.
That's where most of your influence and your learned behaviors comes from, your inner voice, etc. But you transition out from that attachment that you've had with your parents or your guardians. And when you reach 15 and adolescence and you're going into adulthood, you get more influence from peers and outside.
From home, yeah.
Exactly. This is why these things come in now. Your friends are the family that you choose, right? And this is why when you see majority of series and shows, etc., movies in that age period are literally talking about your relationship with your friends. Right? All the sitcoms, all the series, all the dramas that you think about move away from family and really focus on friends and peers.
Okay. So I don't know if there is a way without involving therapy that young adults, practical things they are able to do. So again, you are insecure, you have got, you've had an unstable upbringing. You cannot sustain a job, you can't sustain a relationship. Are there practical things that you have to sort of look at and do?
I do want to, before I answer that question, I do want to bring out a certain point you raised earlier about, many individuals that do feel uncertain in between or, overwhelmed, as is the case right now, may actually go to negative vices, right? And this is where substances come in. And you mentioned codeine, which is a huge thing. By the way, I would like to urge all the over-the-counter pharmacists that are giving out cough syrups to stop. Please ask for a prescription. If not a prescription, then please do ask if they do have the actual symptoms before you give out cough syrups that have codeine in it, because it's really an overwhelming situation. Like I said, look, the brain is still developing, right? And if you're going to start giving it substances like codeine or any other substance like alcohol, okay, you really need to make sure that it's not overdoing the situation, because your brain is going to be wired in a different way. You're introducing substances when your brain even hasn't fully developed, right? So that's the first thing that I would like to really give a caution to. Don't give into the societal beliefs that, being part of the crew or being part of the peer surrounding, you really need to give into these things. Try to avoid as much as possible giving your body or your brain the substances such as alcohol or any thing that really activates you, okay? And I say drugs as well, because that's also very common. And you think that it's only in affluent societies. It's not that in Lusaka, even in the low socioeconomic communities. I work in Kanyama. I see that a lot. So that's happening. What else can young people do? Really invest in your well-being, such that please do sleep. I know it's sleep really. What do you mean? Sleep is really important because it really helps your brain really mold itself. It's really important. So please do cash in your 7 to 8 hours of sleep.
Sounds like too simple a remedy. I think that's why we ignore it.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where you're risk-taking your possibilities. You want to get things done. You want to achieve certain things. You're hustling, right? So you overgo that. So sleep is very, very key. Another thing is also be self-aware about certain things that clearly you're not feeling at peace with. Try to call that out within yourself and communicate that with others. So that's that. And also, oftentimes, don't hop from a situationship to a situationship. I mean, what do I mean by a situationship? It's not just relationships in terms of love.
I've heard those.
Not just for love, but also just friendships, like moving from this space to that space. It's really not healthy, because that's where you're really defining how you're relating with others. And then next thing, people will start labeling you to say it's just a you thing. It's not a them thing. Yeah. I actually read a tweet the other day about, women are actually being used by men to just, dump all their issues. And then once they're done with that, they go on to another woman. And on the other hand, the women are actually, the men are actually saying that, women are very concrete and they don't allow men to open up because they're just so cold, right? So these things, you need to communicate these things. You need to get into relationships with friends, with family, or peers and communicate. Share your feels. Don't hold back.
It's incredible.
Right.
I think in our dying minutes, I'd just like to make reference to your TEDx talk.
Okay.
And if I'm quoting correctly, you spoke about a generational divide. That's something that works with our cultural views and religious views. Please do share more on that concept.
Okay, so look, right now we do have a generational divide, and I'm going to share things from my practice, right? I have had situations where I've had a family that reaches out and says, look, this young person is totally a problem. You know, you're being labeled as a problem. And this is a 19-year-old, 20-year-old coming in who's probably, you know, smoking cannabis or maybe doing drugs, which is, yes, a problem.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a problem, but that is a habit. That is not the whole person, right? So when you communicate to the young person is going to share the same things that, you know, the earlier discussion that we had about feeling in between, not feeling enough, feeling like they have so much possibility, potential, they want to try things out and things like that. So they clearly say, you know, I'm doing this, it's just an experiment. It's not something that I look forward to doing for the rest of my life. So you're not normalizing it. You're communicating to say, don't give yourself a substance that's going to change your whole brain narrative, right? Then when you talk to the parents are just going to come off and say, no, but you know, by this age, I used to be responsible. I was a graduate. I knew that I had to get an education and start thinking about marriage and, you know, start thinking about a life in that sense. You know, so that's what I mean by a generational divide. We're seeing the previous generation that had life in a certain way in their time. And there's a totally different social construct we're living in. And in the next 20 or 30 years, this concept of emerging adulthood may not even be there because it's going to evolve. So we're seeing that a lot. Right now, we have young advocates talking about sexual and reproductive health rights. A young person, a 12, 14-year-old will talk about sexual and reproductive health rights. Yeah. That wasn't even a starter conversation 20 or 30 years ago, right? So that's the religious point of view that I'm bringing. Child marriages, more power to Zambia, have been banned in the country. Right?
Thank you.
Okay. So these are things.
In this country.
Yeah. Right. So we're seeing all these shifts and changes. We're seeing, and we're going to discuss about it on a deep dive in another episode about, you know, workplace mental health. We're seeing more and more women in power positions.
Yes.
Right.
We spoke about that, you and I. And I'm really excited about that episode.
Yeah, so these shifts are taking place, and there's a whole shift in the generations, and we need to meet halfway. I want to say to the young people that, look, guys, the elder generation are not against you or us. It's not like we against them, okay? They are coming from a place of, you know, structured support and mentorship. And again, I would like to say to the older people to say, young people are not the problem. It's not a problem. It is a life phase that, you know, they need support through and they are going through. Yeah.
I think my last question, seeing as we're talking about youth and emerging adulthood, there's a family in my neighborhood. And I don't know if there's any relationship with youth and emerging adulthood and mental illnesses, insanity. There's a family I know. There's about 4 or 5 siblings, I think. And those between the ages of about 15, there's about 3 of them who do this that I'm about to describe. So there's the last guy is about 17, 18. Then his older sister is about 20, 21. And there's another sister about 25, somewhere there. At some point, this happens almost every month. They all just get violent and take all their clothes off and just go nuts.
What?
Yeah. What could this be about?
I feel this should be a disclaimer. We shouldn't be discussing this here on this episode because, you know, you've given quite a few.
They take their clothes off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Where the fuck do you live?
There's a lot of questions that I have here, but
I bring this. I know maybe it may not be the right episode to bring it up, but I bring it up because the younger ones in that family don't have this happening to them, and the older ones. So I figured we're talking about this age group that you brought up mostly between the 15-year-olds and the 25-year-olds, and somehow in this family, these are the people who are suffering from this. So I thought maybe there's a relationship
I
between.
wouldn't say suffering, but also I wouldn't say that. I have so many questions because that's not something that
I have questions too. Does the sister have a good
right.
body?
Okay. But
And what dates do they take their clothes off?
but I would actually say that maybe, if you're saying a few of them do it, maybe there could also be something more to it, right? Because there's so many, mental health and mental illness is a spectrum. There's so many disorders and
It
diseases.
sounds like witchcraft. I'm telling you this now.
We don't have to jump to that conclusion.
You just spoke about religion and how
we don't have to we don't have to jump onto that conclusion, but we are going to have an episode on that where we are going to deep dive into religion. Where is witchcraft? What is transcultural mental health, etc., and what is everything. So but I feel this is not a platform to discuss what you've just said.
I would love to know more about this.
Yes.
Wait, in the same, because you live like in a gated community.
No.
Is it in there?
you know what?
Is it? Just tell me that. Is it like in the same?
Okay,
gated
bring it
community?
up.
This is not the episode for
Yes.
it.
Jesus
Bring it-
Christ. Okay,
bring
can we
it-
switch off the cameras then?
Bring it up in the transcultural episode where
Transcultural episode.
Yeah, when we're talking about different religious views and things where you may think it's a witchcraft thing when you don't even have enough information and just speculate.
It sounds like either they are on like really strong drugs or this is just pure witchcraft.
Okay.
And
all right.
Or some orgy. I don't know.
And it's just short episodes, maybe even 3 hours in that day.
And do you
and
see-
it won't
do you
happen
see this
again?
happen?
Maybe. Sorry.
Do you see this happen?
Yeah, it'll happen maybe like on that particular day. Maybe one of them gets that. I don't want to call. I don't know if I should call it an attack. It just happens. This person just goes nuts, violent, takes all the clothes off, starts beating people up, and then the person just go off, almost like it's schizophrenia.
Okay, so we there's so many questions there, right? And the way you're explaining it from an outsider perspective.
Exactly, yeah.
And I would also say your bias is showing right now. Because you're explaining it based on what you understand and what you see.
What I see,
right? Have you ever had a conversation with the same family? Have you ever reached out to the adults in the home?
No, we just see.
Yes, you see.
One of them comes in the streets with a
right?
stick and no clothes on and just starts.
Yeah, you see, so there's so many things that I would actually ask you to do
All right,
before we
topic for
actually.
another day.
Do they live in the same house?
Yes, they do.
How many of them live in the house? Do you know?
The whole family, they're still there.
So how many people are in the family? Is it because you mentioned
five or six?
And how many people do this?
Three.
Three of the siblings.
Yes.
Are they parents in there?
Yes.
And the parents don't do this.
No.
Are they rich?
No.
I'm sure you see what I was trying
He
to
did
say.
say it's an episode for another day. Dr. Naeem, I think it's been a great episode as well.
It has.
Yeah.
It has.
Yeah, it has.
Unless there's anything you want to add.
Well, I'd just like to say that, look, to everyone, please, if something resonates with you, please reach out to us. We really want to make these podcasts about you. It's not about us just having these conversations.
Yep.
We want to put a face to these conversations. If you'd like to be anonymous, we respect that. We understand that this is an open space that we'd like to promote. So please reach out to the emails and get to us. Share if you resonate with it. Share with someone else. You may just get someone that is feeling in this space get the help that they need.
Perfect.
And the email address, I think, will be on the screen the whole time. Lamek. He'll make sure, plus our number.
Don't just say, all right, Lamek.
To the next episode of the Mental Health Podcast with no name, which we're still brainstorming about.
When we discuss workplace mental health, I really need to have a word with you guys. This is workspace. I feel there's need for some.
Do you feel there's
conversation.
abuse?
No, I'm not saying that.
Lamek is slacking, right? Is that what you mean?
No, I did not say that.
I was hoping you meant that
I just
Lamek
feel
slacks.
there's so much happening in this space
Yes.
that needs to be addressed.
He was sleeping just now.
All right, till the next episode. Have a lovely day.
Dun, 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 dun.